A piercing, agonized scream sliced through the hushed luxury of the first-class cabin, causing passengers to wince and whisper as turbulence shook the plane. Outside the reinforced windows, a blizzard raged over the Atlantic, turning the night into a swirling vortex of white, but the storm inside the cabin felt far more volatile. In Seat 1A, Dante Rossi looked like a man who could command armies but was currently being defeated by a 10-pound infant. The formidable shipping magnate, known for his ice-cold demeanor in boardrooms and back alleys alike, was sweating. His 2-month-old son Leo was arching his back and wailing with a hunger that sounded like heartbreak. Dante rocked the baby, his movements stiff and practiced but ultimately futile. He offered the bottle for the 10th time, but Leo turned his head away, screaming louder. The formula was premium, the temperature perfect, but it wasn't what the child needed. It wasn't her. It had been 8 weeks since Dante's wife died in childbirth, and Leo still hadn't accepted the cold reality of a silicone nipple. "Sir, perhaps you could quiet the child," a businessman across the aisle muttered, not daring to look Dante in the eye but clearly irritated. Dante's bodyguard shifted in Seat 1B, ready to intervene, but Dante waved him off. He was powerful, yes, but power couldn't force a baby to eat. 3 rows back, Alara Vance sat with her hands clenched in her lap. She was wearing a faded cardigan that had seen better days, contrasting sharply with the cashmere and silk around her. She shouldn't have been in first class. It was an upgrade due to a ticketing error, and she had felt the eyes of the other passengers judging her from the moment she boarded. A black woman in her 40s, clearly tired, clearly not one of them. But as Leo's cries shifted from anger to a desperate, hiccuping plea, Alara couldn't sit still anymore. She knew that sound. It was the sound of a baby who needed more than food. He needed a heartbeat. It was the same sound her own daughter used to make before the silence took over. Alara unbuckled her seatbelt. The fasten seatbelt sign was on, but her maternal instinct was louder than any warning chime. She moved up the aisle, steadying herself against the overhead bins as the plane lurched. "Ma'am, sit down." The flight attendant, a blonde woman named Karen whose name tag gleamed under the reading lights, stepped into Alara's path. Her voice was professional, but her eyes were cold. "Economy is back there. Do not disturb the first-class passengers." "I can help," Alara said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm a pediatric nurse. That baby is hungry, and he's not taking the bottle." Karen scanned Alara's worn clothes and dark skin with a look of disdain. "The gentleman has plenty of help. He doesn't need he doesn't need you bothering him. Go back to your seat before I call the marshal." "Let her through." The command cracked like a whip. Dante had stood up, holding the screaming bundle. His dark eyes bored into the flight attendant, making her shrink back. "She said she can help. Let her through." Karen flushed red and stepped aside. Alara didn't hesitate. She walked up to the terrifying man in the expensive suit and looked past his wealth, past his anger, straight at the baby. "He's rejecting the bottle because he's grieving," she said quietly. "He misses his mother." Dante froze. "He's starving." "I know," Alara whispered. She hesitated, the weight of what she was about to offer settling on her shoulders. It was intimate, it was strange, and in a world divided by color and class, it was almost forbidden. "I lost my daughter recently. My body, it hasn't stopped producing. If you allow me, I can feed him." The silence that followed was louder than the storm outside. Dante looked at this stranger, this woman who had every reason to stay in her seat and let him suffer, and saw only open, aching kindness. He nodded once. Alara took Leo. The baby immediately sensed the change, the softness, the warmth. She carried him into the small lavatory for privacy. The moment she settled on the closed lid and brought him to her breast, the screaming cut off instantly. Leo latched on with a desperate little sound that broke Alara's heart. Tears streamed down her face as she looked down at the white baby nursing from her black body, 2 tragedies finding comfort in the dark. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Alara stepped out, holding a sleeping, milk-drunk Leo. The cabin was dead silent. She handed the boy back to his father. Dante looked at his son, peaceful for the first time in weeks, and then at Alara. The hardness in his face fractured, revealing the exhausted father beneath. As the intercom announced their descent into Boston, Dante reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a heavy black card with gold embossing, no name, just a number and a family crest. He pressed it into Alara's hand, his fingers brushing hers, ignoring the flight attendant's shocked stare. "You saved my son," he said, his voice low and intense, carrying the weight of a promise that would change both their lives forever. "The Rossi family never forgets a debt. Call me if you ever need anything. Anything at all." 2 days later, a sleek black SUV blocked Alara's driveway in a working-class Boston neighborhood, looking like a predator waiting to strike. Alara peered through her kitchen curtains, her heart skipping a beat. She didn't need to see the license plate to know who it was. The memory of the black business card burned in her pocket. When she opened the front door, Dante Rossi stood there, snow dusting the shoulders of his wool coat. He looked worse than he had on the plane, eyes hollow, desperation carving deep lines into his handsome face. "He won't eat," Dante said. "No hello, no pleasantries. Just raw panic. Since the plane. Nothing. He's starving, Alara." He held out a check. Alara glanced at it. The number was enough to pay off her mortgage twice over. "1 week," he pleaded. "Come to the estate. Transition him to the bottle. I'll double it." Alara pushed the check back firmly. "Put your money away, Mr. Rossi. I'm not a mercenary." She grabbed her coat from the hook, her nurse's instinct overriding her fear of his world. "I'm doing this for the baby." The drive to Vermont was a blur of silence and tension. The Rossi estate emerged from the white landscape like a medieval fortress, all gray stone and imposing iron gates. It was magnificent, but it lacked warmth. It felt like a tomb waiting for a funeral. As the heavy oak doors swung open, an older woman stood in the center of the marble foyer like a statue of judgment. Aunt Rosa, the keeper of the Rossi household, wore severe black lace and a scowl that could curdle milk. Her eyes snapped to Alara, and the disgust was immediate and visceral. "Questa?" Rosa spat the word, looking Alara up and down. She refused to extend a hand or take Alara's dripping coat. "This is the help you brought, Dante? She does not belong in this house. The neighbors will talk." "She is here for my son, Rosa." Dante's voice was low, warning. "She stays in the guest suite next to the nursery." "The guest suite?" Rosa scoffed, switching to broken English so Alara wouldn't miss the insult. "She belongs in the staff quarters. If she stays at all." Alara lifted her chin, meeting the older woman's gaze with quiet dignity. She had faced prejudice all her life. She wouldn't let it stop her now. "Where is the baby?" she asked. A cry from upstairs answered her. Alara brushed past the stunned matron and ran up the grand staircase. In the nursery, Leo was red-faced and thrashing. Alara wasted no time. She scooped the frantic infant from his crib, sitting in the velvet rocking chair. "Shoo, little one. I'm here." She adjusted her blouse and brought him close. The moment Leo latched, his cries were cut off as if by a switch. The room fell into a heavy, sacred silence. Aunt Rosa, who had followed them up ready to scold, froze in the doorway. She watched, her mouth slightly open, stunned to see the heir to the Rossi bloodline, the future Don, finding absolute peace in the arms of a woman she deemed unworthy. Alara rocked him until his breathing evened out, feeling the heavy, hostile gaze of the household upon her. She was in the lion's den now. Later, as she stepped into the hallway to find water, Dante pulled her into a shadowy alcove. His face was grave, stripped of the relief she expected. He looked less like a father now and more like a man preparing for war. "There is something you must know," he whispered, his eyes scanning the corridor for eavesdroppers. "By feeding him, you have triggered an ancient law. To my enemies, you are no longer a nurse. You are the queen." Alara woke to the rich aroma of fresh coffee and the unsettling realization that she was being watched, not by a person, but by the red, unblinking eye of a security camera in the corner of the ceiling. It was a stark reminder. This wasn't a holiday. It was a cage wrapped in silk sheets. She threw on her robe and headed downstairs, following the scent to the kitchen. She expected to find staff, but instead, she found Dante. He was leaning against the marble island, his dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He looked exhausted, human, and dangerous. Coffee. He didn't turn around, but he slid a mug across the counter. Black, 2 sugars. That's how you took it on the plane. Alara took the cup, surprised he remembered. Thank you. You're up early. I don't sleep much, Dante admitted, turning to face her. The morning sun reflected off the snow outside, illuminating the shadows under his eyes. Silence is too loud in this house. It reminds me of what's missing. Your wife, Alara said softly. And your daughter, Dante replied, his gaze piercing. We are 2 ghosts haunting the same castle, Alara. For a moment, the racial and class divide between them evaporated. They were just 2 grieving parents trying to keep a baby alive. Alara took a sip of coffee, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the caffeine. Leo slept through the night, she offered. He feels safe here. He feels safe with you. Dante's expression softened, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. It was a moment of fragile peace, a glimpse of the family they could almost be. Crash! The piece shattered along with the antique library window in the next room. The sound of breaking glass echoed like a gunshot. Dante moved instantly, his body shifting from tired father to lethal predator in a split second. He shoved Alara behind the heavy kitchen island. Stay down. He rushed into the library, Alara following despite his order. Snow and glass covered the Persian rug. Lying amidst the shards was a brick wrapped in paper. Dante snatched it up, ripping the paper open. Alara saw the message scrawled in jagged red marker, the words vile and hateful. We don't mix blood. Hand her over or bleed. It was a direct attack on her race, on her presence in his world. Dante's hand shook, not with fear, but with a rage so profound the air seemed to drop 10 degrees. He crushed the note in his fist, veins bulging in his neck. He turned to Alara, and for the first time, she saw the monster everyone whispered about. His eyes were black voids of fury. They think they can touch you, he snarled, stepping over the broken glass to reach her. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip bruising in its intensity, pulling her close. They think they can threaten what is mine? Dante, you're hurting me, Alara whispered, terrified by the violence radiating off him. He didn't let go. Instead, he pulled her closer, his voice dropping to a terrifying, possessive growl. Let them come. I will burn this city to ash before I let them touch a single hair on your head. You are under my protection now, Alara. And God help anyone who forgets that. The serene silence of the Vermont winter was shattered not by the wind, but by a deafening explosion that shook the stone foundations of the Rossi estate. Dust rained down from the nursery ceiling as the blast wave knocked Alara to her knees. Before she could even scream, the heavy oak door burst open. Dante stood there, silhouetted by the orange glow of flames licking the hallway behind him. He wasn't the grieving father or the charming host anymore. He was a soldier. They breached the perimeter, Dante barked, shoving a heavy woolen coat into Alara's arms. He moved with terrifying efficiency, checking the clip of his handgun. Take Leo. Go with Rosa to the service tunnels. Do not stop for anything. Dante, come with us. Alara cried, clutching the terrified, wailing baby to her chest. I have to hold them back, he said, pressing a fierce, desperate kiss to her forehead, a goodbye disguised as a promise. Go. He turned and ran back into the smoke, his gun raised. Alara fled in the opposite direction, finding Aunt Rosa struggling to open a hidden panel behind a tapestry. The older woman's face was pale, stripped of its usual arrogance. Together, they stumbled into the narrow, freezing stone passage that smelled of damp earth and old secrets. The tunnel was long and treacherous. Aunt Rosa, breathless and clutching her chest, began to lag behind. The sounds of gunfire echoed from the house above, getting closer. They reached a heavy iron door that led to the woods, but Rosa stopped. She didn't follow Alara through. Instead, she leaned against the rusted locking mechanism. Rosa, move. We have to go, Alara urged, reaching back for her. Rosa looked at Alara, then at the baby hidden in her coat. For the first time, there was no sneer, no racial slur, only a stark, grim respect. I cannot run in the snow. I will only slow you down, Rosa rasped. She grabbed the heavy iron handle. Go. Save the air. You are his mother now, not me. With a final heave, Aunt Rosa slammed the door shut between them and threw the deadbolt, sealing herself inside to face the intruders alone. Alara didn't have time to mourn. She burst out of the hidden exit into the biting cold of the forest. The snow was knee-deep, and the air burned her lungs. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing near the tree-line where the driveway met the main road. Silence fell, and for a heartbeat, she thought she had made it. Then, blinding white headlights cut through the darkness, pinning her like a moth. A car door opened. Alara scrambled backward, clutching Leo, but two men stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. A third figure emerged from the back of the SUV, a man in a pristine cashmere coat, unbothered by the cold. Victor Thorne. He walked up to her slowly, looking down with a mixture of amusement and disgust. So this is it, he sneered, his eyes flicking over her dark skin and the Rossi air in her arms. The great Dante Rossi is losing his empire for a wet nurse? Pathetic. Alara tried to scream, but a rough hand clamped over her mouth. Thorne stepped closer, gripping her chin and forcing her to look at the burning mansion in the distance. You're the one destroying a legacy? He whispered, his voice like ice. Let's see if he loves you enough to die for it. Alara knelt on the freezing concrete floor of the abandoned shipyard warehouse, clutching Leo so tightly her knuckles turned white. The air smelled of rust, sea salt, and impending death. Victor Thorne circled her like a shark in a tailored suit, the click-clack of his dress shoes echoing in the vast, empty space. He stopped in front of her, looking down with a sneer that twisted his features. Look at you, Thorne spat, gesturing with his gun. A nurse. A nobody. And yet, you're the rock that sank the Rossi ship. It's almost poetic, really, how a man like Dante could be brought low by something so common. The metal warehouse doors groaned open. Alara's breath hitched. Dante walked in alone. He was unarmed, his hands raised in surrender, his face bruised and streaked with soot from the fire he'd left behind. But his eyes were fixed solely on Alara and the baby. I'm here, Victor. Dante's voice was dead calm. Let them go. Not yet. Thorne laughed, signaling one of his men to bring a briefcase forward. He kicked it toward Dante. The transfer papers. Shipping routes, territories, the legitimate businesses, and the not-so-legitimate ones. Sign it all over. Make me the king. Dante didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees, opening the case on the dirty floor. He signed page after page, signing away generations of power, wealth, and blood. It's yours, Dante said, closing the case and pushing it away. The empire is yours. Now let them leave. Touching, Thorne mused, picking up the papers. He checked the signatures, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Then he raised his gun, aiming not at Dante, but at Alara's head. But we both know I can't do that. You've disgraced our traditions, Dante. You let an outsider raise the heir. The boy is tainted. The woman is a liability. I'm doing you a favor. No. Dante screamed, lunging forward, but he was too far away. Alara didn't scream. She didn't cower. In that split second, she wasn't a victim. She was a mother protecting her child. Her hand closed around a heavy, rusted iron pipe lying in the debris beside her knee. As Thorne turned his gaze slightly to relish Dante's despair, Alara swung the pipe with every ounce of maternal rage she possessed. Crack! The iron struck Thorne's kneecap with sickening force. He howled, his shot going wide and shattering a window high above. You bitch! Thorne crumbled, dropping the gun. Dante was on him in a heartbeat. He moved like a blur of violence, tackling Thorne to the ground. Punches rained down, brutal and unforgiving. Dante grabbed the fallen gun, pressed the barrel against Thorne's forehead, and pulled back the hammer. His eyes were wild, consumed by the darkness he had tried so hard to hide from Alara. Do it! Thorne spat blood, grinning through broken teeth. Kill me. Become what you always were, Rossi. Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. He was trembling, the monster within him screaming for blood. Dante, no. Alara's voice cut through the red haze. She stood up, Leo crying softly against her chest. She stepped toward him, ignoring the danger, ignoring the blood. Look at your son, Dante. Look at him. Don't let his first memory be his father becoming a murderer. We survived. We have nothing left to lose. But don't lose your soul. Dante froze. He looked at Thorne, then at the trembling gun in his hand, and finally at Alara, the woman who had walked into his nightmare and turned on the light. Slowly, agonizingly, he lowered the weapon. "You're not worth it," Dante whispered. He pistol-whipped Thorne into unconsciousness and stood up, kicking the gun away. Sirens wailed in the distance, the police, or perhaps the council's enforcers coming to clean up the mess. It didn't matter. Dante turned and walked to Alara, pulling her and Leo into a crushing embrace, burying his face in her neck. "It's over," he sobbed, his body shaking. "I'm sorry. I gave it all away. We have nothing." Alara pulled back, wiping the soot from his cheek, and smiled through her tears. "We have everything." 6 months later, the biting cold of the Vermont winter was just a memory, replaced by the golden glow of a Montana sunset. The air smelled of sagebrush and grilled food, not gunpowder. On the porch of a rustic ranch house, music played softly. It was a wedding reception, but there were no security details, no armored cars, just a handful of friends and family gathered under string lights. Dante Rossi, wearing a simple linen suit, held Alara close as they swayed to the music. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Rossi," Dante whispered, his voice lighter than she had ever heard it. "And you look relaxed, Mr. Rossi," Alara teased, resting her head on his chest. Nearby, 8-month-old Leo was crawling through the grass, chasing a golden retriever, his laughter ringing out like a bell. The peace was interrupted by the crunch of gravel. A single black sedan pulled up the long driveway. Alara stiffened, her hand tightening on Dante's lapel. The old fear flared up. Had the past finally come to collect? But Dante didn't reach for a weapon. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's okay." An older man stepped out of the car. It was Don Calabrese, the head of the commission, leaning heavily on a cane. He walked slowly toward the porch. He stopped in front of Alara and removed his hat, bowing his head in a gesture of profound respect that silenced the guests. "Victor Thorne was a fool," Calabrese said, his voice gravelly but sincere. "He saw only color. He did not understand the old code. The law says the mother of the air is sacred. It does not speak of bloodlines or race. It speaks of heart." He looked Alara in the eye. "You have the heart of a lioness, Mrs. Rossi. You saved the boy. You saved the man." He handed Dante a thick envelope sealed with wax. "Your retirement is official. The territories are divided. You are out. Truly out." Dante took the envelope. He walked over to the fire pit where marshmallows were roasting. Without opening it, he tossed the document into the flames. He watched the paper and his former life curl into ash and drift away into the night sky. "No more Dawn," Dante said, turning back to his wife. "Just Dante." He pulled Alara back into his arms as the music swelled. The nightmare was over. They were free. "I have one problem with this new life, though," Alara whispered against his ear, a playful smile touching her lips. Dante pulled back, concerned. "What is it?" "This house," she murmured, placing his hand gently on her stomach. "It's perfect, but I think we're going to need a bigger crib." Dante froze. His eyes widened, shifting from her stomach to her smiling face. "Another." Alara nodded, tears of joy shining in her eyes. "Another." Dante threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed across the plains. He spun her around under the vast, star-filled American sky, holding his world in his arms. From the cold turbulence of a winter flight to the warm glow of a Montana sunset, Alara and Dante's journey proves that the strongest families are sometimes built not by blood, but by the courage to care. Their story reminds us that when we set aside our judgments and open our hearts to the unthinkable, we often find the very salvation we've been searching for. Like a single candle in a snowstorm, one act of unconditional kindness has the power to melt the hardest ice and guide us home. May this story inspire you to look past the surface and extend a hand to a stranger today. You never know whose life or whose soul you might save.